Hey everybody, it's Grandmaster Ben Feingold here with Chess.com, game of the day. And it was a pretty easy game to choose the game of the day. It was the first game in the finals of the Chessable Masters between Magnus Carlsen and Anish Giri. Magnus won the match yesterday, so today Anish had to win. It's a 4-game match. Yesterday it was tied at 2, and they played a couple of blitz games. Magnus won the second blitz game, so he won the match yesterday. And this is game 1 today. Let's look right into it. It was a semi-Tarash where white plays both knights out in a queen's gambit, and black plays a very early c5. Now, maybe 30, 40 years ago, people would take with the pawn on d5 and get sort of a regular Tarash variation, which Kasparov used to play in the 80s. But nowadays, there's these really long forcing lines in the semi-Tarash where black takes with the knight and plays sort of in Grunfeld style, except instead of attacking the center, he just develops his pieces quickly and tries to equalize. So you see this kind of Grunfeld type position where if black had played g6 and bishop g7, it would be a Grunfeld, but black's already played e6, so that's not going to happen. So instead, black trades everything and tries to equalize that way. So we trade on d4, we check, we trade on d2, and black is saying, look, I'm trading everything, I'm going to develop my pieces. Your center's pretty good, but I'm not that afraid of it, I'll still attack it. Now in the Grunfeld, black is often attacking on this diagonal, but in the semi-Tarash, black attacks on this diagonal. So that's a slight difference there. Okay, and previous semi-Tarashes in this tournament, we saw white playing rook d1, which is a little unusual. Bishop c4 is the more common move. Okay, and everybody develops their pieces in castles. And what differentiates this game from other semi-Tarash games is the rapidity of Magnus's play. Magnus had deep preparation in this line. I don't know if he prepared it for this game, if this was World Championship prep that he finally got to use, I don't know. But he was playing quickly and confidently, and right away the engine wasn't agreeing with it, but I'm sure he's looked at it with better engines and his coaches, and he was raring to go. After rook c8 attacking the bishop, bishop b3, rook e8, this position looks like white's a little better, white has the center, but black is really solid, and immediately Magnus played rook e3, which surprised me, and it's obviously his preparation. Now, I did live commentary on this game on Chess.com, and after knight f6, somebody that was in my chat, and we have hundreds of people watching, they said d5 was a novelty. So that means that Magnus had prepared this move, but maybe Anish didn't know it because it's never been played before. I'm not sure if that's true, but if you can't trust your chat, then who can you trust? Okay, now obviously this pawn is attacked. White could defend it in any number of ways. Bishop c2, queen d3, rook e1, but he decided to play d5 and not to trade and play a boring game, which would result after e takes d5 and maybe queen d6 blocking the pawn. Something like this. Pretty equal position. This pawn's not going to queen. It's pretty well blockaded. It might even get captured later. And the engine says this is about equal. Magnus's idea was more sinister. He played the move e5. His idea is to blockade. Put the knight on d4, sacrificing a pawn, but this isolated d-pawn is blocking this bishop, making the bishop quite bad, and the white knight is quite strong. And again, Magnus was playing almost immediately every move because this was his preparation, this d5, e5. Okay, the knight's attacked. So he played knight e4, attacking the queen. Once again, Magnus instantly played queen e1. And the engine right away doesn't think that white is better, and that's how I knew it was preparation. Magnus is playing very quickly, and he has deeper preparation than like 5 seconds of the engine. Now, this is a very double-edged kind of position. Luckily for us, there's a really obvious threat. The rook is pinning the pawn now, so rook takes e4 is the threat. And black has several ways to prevent that. He could move his queen out of the pin, queen c7, queen e7, or he could move his knight to c5, knight to g5. And Giri thought a long time here and played queen c7. That move is reasonable. And once again, Magnus played instantly. Okay, he didn't think at all in this position. Obviously, if this wasn't his preparation, he would have a 30-second, 1-minute think. But he didn't do that. He played knight to d4. Pretty obvious idea. Knight b5 attacks the queen. Knight d6 is a fork. Knight here. He wants to play f3 and kick the knight out. That's why he's moving his knight away from f3. And maybe the rook can slide over here and we can have sort of a rook lift, or as Jen Shadi likes to call it, a rover, rook up and over. So black has a difficult defense here since he doesn't know the position and we're still in Magnus's prep. And Anish knows that. He's like, man, Magnus is moving instantly every move. What did I walk into? Okay, so this is the first minor mistake that Anish makes. The engine wants him to move his queen because knight b5 is annoying, queen c7, queen d7, or play rook d8, which walks out of the fork because the rook's not on c8 anymore. Now, the obvious move for black that you may be thinking about right now, why isn't he just taking on e5? Well, then the knight's pinned, and when I play f3, you can't move your knight. So if you take the pawn on e5 either way, you're going to lose your knight on e4. It's going to be pinned. So he played a6, Anish did, a very human move, and that stops knight to b5. However, it's not a computer move. The engine doesn't like it, and because of that, Magnus probably didn't analyze a6. It's not an engine move. It's not the first engine move. It's not the second engine move. It's not the third engine move. So now Magnus started thinking he's out of his preparation. This is good news and bad news. If Magnus is out of his prep, does that mean he didn't prep really, really deep? Or does that mean I just made a bad move? Magnus didn't look at that move. The computer doesn't like it. That's more likely. And Anish knows that. He knows the first time Magnus thinks in the game, I must have played a non-engine move. Okay, and that's true. a6 is okay, though. It's pretty good for a non-engine move. All right, now Magnus can play f3 and kick the knight, but he started the attack h4, which is fine. And Giri played rook to d8, which is also okay. f3 attacks the knight. The knight can't go to g5 because of Magnus's h4, so knight to c5. The problem is, if Giri decides to trade pieces to stop the attack, like knight takes bishop at some point, look what's remaining. The bishop on b7, not a good bishop. Knight on d4, that's a great knight. So this is a very difficult defense for Giri. And I didn't say it before in the video, but I'm going to say it now. Giri was not playing quickly. This is game 15 with a 10-second increment. Magnus moving instantly every move. Giri's thinking a long time. Giri had a huge time disadvantage now. He had about 3.5 minutes, and Magnus still had 15 minutes left, at least. So Magnus has almost all of his time, if not all of his time, and Giri's in time trouble, and Magnus has a wicked attack. Okay, he played h4, so he played h5. Knight f5 is also good. And Giri didn't like this knight on d4, so he played the move knight e6. The engine doesn't like that move, tries to trade off the knight. Magnus doesn't want to trade the knight off. Magnus plays knight f5. Okay, now here Giri made a big decision, and it might be the losing move. Giri made a move which tries to force a variation to trade a lot of pieces because he doesn't want to get checkmated. White's going to play queen g3 and attack over here and h6 and knight d6. White's attacking. If White's attack doesn't work, he can go to work on the d pawn. The bishop's on it, the rook's on it, this rook can get on it. So White has more than one way to play. Black is sitting here in a defensive mode. Why am I saying all these bad things about Black's position? Why did Black do this? Well, Black's a pawn up. White sacrificed a pawn. It wasn't necessarily engine recommended, but the deeper you look, you see that White has excellent compensation for a pawn. Very Kasparov-like. Sack a pawn, get compensation later with your active pieces. Giri had enough of his bad bishop. He's like, come on, I want to move my bishop. So he played d4. This is a double-edged move because it helps his bishop, but it also helps Magnus's bishop, and it makes the pawn even weaker because after rook d3, this pawn's really attacked a lot of times, and the queen could go to f2 or h4 or d2 and attack it some more. I mean, Black has an extra pawn. If he loses this pawn, then White just has a free attack. Also, knight d6 is coming, queen g3. Very difficult position for Giri, especially with the time situation. Well, the engine loves the knight on e6 defending, I agree, and so it wants to play bishop d5 and trade pieces that way. And white still has a big advantage because white has knight d6, white can win his pawn back, white's attacking the black king. The black 2-1 pawn majority, that's not serious right now. So bishop d5 is the best move and Magnus has a nice advantage. Instead, Giri played knight c5. Probably don't want to play knight f6, knight e4, knight c5, knight e6, knight c5. Too many knight moves. Okay, is attacking the rook, obviously. Rook takes d4, they trade. And unfortunately for Giri, he can't win the pawn on e5 because of his weak back rank. That didn't stop my chat during the live game saying, why does he take on e5? Well, if you play rook takes e5, for example, I take the rook. And if you take my queen, there's a back rank checkmate coming. So you can't take the pawn on e5 because of your weak back rank. Unfortunately, that's a good bishop, that's a great knight, that's a good rook. Here comes queen g3, and black has nothing to show for it. Black's not up any material anymore. Giri sacrificed that d-pawn, but he didn't really ease the attack any. Okay, so Giri took that bishop. He thought that bishop was too strong. And instead of recapturing, which is fine, Magnus decided to attack queen g3, threatening queen g7 mate. Okay, you got to stop queen g7 mate. You still can't take on e5. There's still the back rank mate trick. Now, you can't take with the rook because your mate is happening. Take with the queen, which stops mate. Then you get mated another way. Okay, it's mate everywhere. All right, so instead, Giri played g6, which is the best move. Magnus took back. Now, in this position, I would say white's winning, but some grandmasters might say white has a very large advantage. Not sure if he's winning. Probably. Again, the engine says like +2, even though material's equal. Okay, because great rook, great knight, nice pawn here, queen, and again, the bishop, even though the d5 pawn is missing, I mean, it can't really, there's no good squares for that bishop. Okay, now in this position, we saw a terrible blunder from Giri, which lost the game immediately. But I want to show you a funny variation, okay? And I don't think Giri looked at this move. I know that I wouldn't. The funny variation is bishop takes f3. It's a very strange move, okay? And the idea is, if you take with the queen, let's say, for example, now you're not pinning this pawn anymore, so I can take the knight. Now we have a queen and rook ending, where at this moment, black is a pawn up. Both kings are open. The e5 pawn's really weak. The engine actually prefers black here slightly. Okay, so we take with the g pawn if you want to win a piece, but that loses the game because of queen c1 check. And now we play queen c2 check and take with the queen. I'm not sure if Giri saw that or not. After bishop takes f3, the correct move is rook to c4, not taking the bishop and stopping queen c1 check. And the engine says white should have a winning advantage because once the queen moves, we can play knight d6 attacking the rook, the bishop's hanging, etc. I don't know if Giri saw bishop takes f3. It's sort of a tricky move in time trouble. Okay, instead, he played rook to d8, which is a big blunder. And the reason it's a big blunder is the queen is overworked, and this is a very dangerous move, rook to d8. The rook needs to be defended by the queen. Why? Otherwise, rook takes d8 as mate. So, because of that, white will do anything to get rid of this queen. If I can get rid of that queen, rook takes d8 as mate. And rook d8's a blunder. White has more than one winning move, but Magnus found the most accurate move. Okay, which move wins immediately? And Magnus found it. Very nice move. This was the move of the game. He played e6. Notice how my queen is attacking your queen, and if you take my queen, I checkmate you. Now we have some other issues. Not only is your queen hanging, that e-pawn's looking awful tough. E takes f7, e7. Now, in my chat today, after the game ended, and we were waiting for the next game, one of my people said, why didn't black play queen b8? Okay, and I was thinking, queen b8, man, that's harsh. You know, it doesn't look too good. Okay, and the engine says everything is mate. queen g5, queen h4. Queen f4 is the funniest move, moving towards the queen. And the idea is you want to play queen h6 and queen here mate. Okay. Now, I thought in my head, and I still think, I could play queen e5. The engine isn't giving that, but I don't know why. So let's play queen e5, and that's also mate. I'm threatening checkmate. You can't take my queen because this is mate. So even in my head, my move that wasn't the engine move is also mate. Okay, this is a terrible position. You have to play g takes f5, and amazingly, I can play h6. You still can't take my queen because this is still mate, and now you're going to have trouble stopping this mate, and so forth. Okay, so after e6, Giri played the best way. He checked, and he took the rook, and now this is amazing. You don't recapture, you simply play e7. And Magnus had to see, after queen c1 rook takes, that he could play e7. He had to analyze this correctly. Now, what did Magnus analyze? Not much. You can't play rook e4, that's defended. You can't play queen e3. You can't play queen e1. You got to stop e8. You can't let him play e8 mate. So the two options are queen c6 and queen c8. That's basically all you have to look at. Queen c6 doesn't make any sense because my queen can go to the back rank. So queen c8 is probably one of the only moves that Magnus looked at in this position in his head when he played e6, because queen c8's forced. And he did play queen c8. Okay, and many moves win here. Knight takes is pretty easy, but queen e5 is better. That's what Magnus played. Threatening mate, threatening the rook, threatening knight h6 mate, and threatening e8 queen. That's a lot of threats. The main variation is takes, queen, takes, takes. And here, black's not down too much material, but after queen e5 he is. Now he's down too much material. Okay, if it wasn't for queen e5, white's still winning, but it's close, but now it's not close. So Giri didn't do that. Giri played rook h4 check, hoping that knight moves away, stopping queen g7 mate and knight h6 mate. And there's nothing wrong with that, but Magnus played king g3, pretty cute move, not necessary. And now I'm going to queen with mate, I'm going to play queen g7 mate, I'm going to play knight h6 mate. Giri stopped them all. That's why he's a super GM. He resigned. Okay, that was a brilliant game for Magnus. He had great opening preparation, which gave him a big time advantage. His attack never let up, and Giri couldn't quite defend with the time situation he was in, and Magnus used all of his pieces to attack, even his king at the end. Maybe a tribute to Nigel Short, moving his king up this way. Well, that was a great game. That was the game of the day. It was the only decisive game in the match. Magnus wins another Super GM tournament, not very surprising, and he wins pretty handily. Congratulations to Magnus. Congratulations on not only winning the tournament, but game of the day. Even more important. This is Grandmaster Ben Feingold for Chess.com. Don't forget to keep clicking on the videos for more games of the day and more great videos from Chess.com. Bye, everyone.